Hello, I'm the Pickled Onion Knight, and this is a video about Super Famicom games. Now, the reason this video has come about is that I have decided that I am gonna do some more Super Nintendo collecting, because it's been a while. I haven't bought any Super Nintendo games in a very long time, purely because they're very expensive. So I thought, well, I still don't want to play. I'll do that again. I thought, well, I still don't want to pay the super inflated prices that some cartridges seem to be going for at the moment. And I am a cartridge collector. I'm not interested in the boxes or the manuals. I mean, yeah, if I can get them, brilliant, bonus. But I want to play the games. They're not going to sit on a shelf. And to be perfectly honest with you, if I had a really expensive box and manual to go along with something, I would be worried about playing it, because I don't want to keep, you keep opening them boxes, you're going to tear them after a while, even if you're careful. So cartridge will do me, to be perfectly honest. But something happened. I actually went and had a think about it, and I thought, there are plenty of games that I would love to play, but I don't mind having a cheaper version of them. So I thought, brilliant, I'll just get the Famicom version, because they are conventional wisdom, and even I've said in the past, the Famicom stuff is always cheaper. But and this is sort of the point of this video, is that I started looking for stuff that I wanted, and it turns out that quite a lot of that is absolute bullshit. And I'll just tell you, and I'll just explain before I start this video. I will tell you that there is a clear 2 or 3 days of research gone into this. So, because somebody pulled me up on some points on the last video I did where I thought I'd researched something thoroughly, and then it turns out that I'd completely missed something that was blatantly obvious, and I did get pulled up on that point, and I have since corrected myself in the comments section of the video. I can't remember which one it was offhand, but there you go, I've done that. So I thought, I'm definitely going to put the research into this. So I thought, well, here's a starting point. I'm going to start with the list of every PAL Super Nintendo game. So that was my starting point for this list. And then I've decided that I'm going to see which ones consistently go for more than £35. Right, and this is PAL Super Nintendo games. Now, if you're an American watching this, and I do know I get quite a large proportion of my views from the States, which is disappointing, because I thought my stuff would be more relevant to UK viewers. Apparently it's not. My watch time is far exceeded in the stats from people from the States, so thank you, my American cousins. But, UK, pull your pants up, get on with it, start watching my stuff. It's more relevant to you. This might be relevant to a US collector as well, because I'm going to talk about Japanese imports in a bit. So keep watching. So anyway, I decided I'm going to whittle that list down, and I'm going to make a list of the 50, 60 or so games that consistently go for more than £35. And this isn't just on eBay, this is on other places as well, so like reselling sites, CEX, places like that. So I did that, and I came up with my list of 50 or 60 games that consistently sell for more than £35 cartridge only. Because like I say, I'm not a box collector. I know pretty much anything on the Super Nintendo can go for £35 with a box and manual. I'm not stupid, but I thought £35 is a good amount as well. Because if you have to import, if you're buying a Famicom cartridge, a Super Famicom cartridge that's already in the country you live in, it's going to be vastly cheaper than £35 for most things. But if you've got to pay for it to be shipped from Japan, I think £35 is probably at a price point. 35 or more is probably a price point where the shipping has negated the money you've saved. I mean, obviously, you can buy Super Mario World here for about 15 quid cartridge only. The Famicom version will set you back about £8 or £9 for the cartridge, and then it's £6 or £7 shipping. So do you really? Do you know what I mean? You're not saving any money by buying the Japanese version. So I think £35 is a good amount. So yeah, so whittling the list of every PAL game down to ones that consistently sell for over £35 gave me, 58 games. And then I started to whittle it down even more. And there was stuff that would just, stuff that would be obvious, like, i.e., it wasn't available in Japan. It was literally a PAL exclusive and didn't come out anywhere else. So that would be something like Days Before Christmas. PAL exclusive, didn't come out in Japan. So you can't import that. And then I took off the ones that wouldn't work through standard universal adapters or converters. So that would be Street Fighter Alpha 2. There's no point in importing that from Japan, because if you try and play that on a PAL console through a converter, it won't work, because the special chip that's in it doesn't play through a converter. Now, the proviso to this is there is supposedly an Action Replay version 2 that it does work through, just not very well. But by and large, for the vast majority of people, an imported copy of Street Fighter Alpha 2 from Japan won't work through a converter, so you're not going to save any money. But then, surprisingly, it turns out that the big ticket games in the PAL territories are also the same ones that are the big ticket games in Japan. So I'll just go through the list of stuff that it's not worth buying, just in case you're interested. So again, this is all stuff that goes consistently for over £35 as a PAL cartridge, that it is not worth buying from Japan. In my opinion, this is. And I will tell you why as well. So, Days Before Christmas. You can't buy that from Japan because it wasn't sold in Japan. It's literally a PAL exclusive. Secret of Mana. Incidentally, some of these games you are going to hear me butchering the Japanese language, so that might be a bit fun as well. Secret of Mana, there's no point, you can't play it unless you can speak Japanese. Otherwise it would be a good idea to import it from Japan, but if you don't speak Japanese you'll never complete the game. Street Fighter Alpha 2, like I said earlier, doesn't work through converters. Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. You're not going to save any money. That goes consistently for the same prices in Japan as it does here. Super Metroid, exactly the same. You're not going to save any money. Turtles in Time. You're not going to save any money. Castlevania 4, or if you want to buy the Super Famicom version, Akumajo Dracula. You're not going to save any money. Consistently goes for quite a lot of money in Japan as well. Sunset Riders. Sanseto Raidazu. That might be a piss take name. I think somebody on a forum's winding me up. But there you go. Wasn't released in Japan apparently. Who knew that? I thought it was. I thought it was because because it's a Konami game, isn't it? Is it Konami or Sunsoft? Anyway, it's a Japanese game, so I assumed it was released in Japan, but no, not available. Couldn't find it anywhere. Couldn't find it on import sites. Couldn't find it on PlayAsia. I couldn't find it on what's the one I always use? Hokkaido or Hokkaido Games. That's based in Britain. Couldn't find it there either. So Sunset Riders or Sanseto Raidazu didn't have it in Japan apparently. Secret of Evermore or Seiken Densetsu 3 because it's a number 3 in Japan. Again, you could import it and you might save a couple of quid, but you can't play it because you can't read Japanese. Robocop vs Terminator didn't come out in Japan. Captain Commando. Now, this is a funny one. The Japanese version of this consistently goes for much more money than the PAL version. Who knew? But it's true. Captain Commando is a very expensive game in Europe. It is even more expensive if you want the Super Famicom version, because apparently it was very rare in Japan. So there you go. Maximum Carnage didn't come out in Japan. Aero the Acrobat 2 didn't come out in Japan. Death and Return of Superman didn't come out in Japan. Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel didn't come out in Japan. Hagane goes for just as much money in Japan as it does here. And I don't know why, because it's a sought after game in Europe, but it's not as rare in Europe as it is in the States. There was no exclusivity with Hagane in Europe. You could just walk into a shop and buy it, whereas in the States it's a rare game, because I think it was only Blockbuster that sold it. I mean, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the case. But again, it's an expensive game in Japan as it is here. Batman and Robin didn't come out in Japan. Beethoven, not the Viennese song guy, but the big dog, didn't come out in Japan. Ninja Warriors New Generation didn't come out in Japan. Wild Guns, the Japanese version is far more expensive than the European version. Oscar, I've never seen this game before, but apparently it didn't come out in Japan. So there you are. You're going to love the pronunciation on this. Pocky and Rocky, or if you want to import it in Japan, Kiki Kai Kai Pocky Rocky Nazo no Kuro Manto. You're not going to save any money on that by importing it. It's reasonably priced in Japan as well. Separation Anxiety, which should be... It's the Spider-Man one, isn't it? Separation Anxiety is Spider-Man and Venom, I think. But again, didn't come out in Japan. Marvel Superheroes War of the Gems, a reasonably rare game in Europe, and by all accounts, very rare in Japan. It is far more expensive to buy it in Japan than it is here. So there you go. Demon's Crest, or Demon's Blazon. You're not going to save any money by importing it. Cool World didn't come out in Japan. Super Turrican 2 didn't come out in Japan. Pocky and Rocky 2, or Kiki Kai Kai Tsukiyo Soshi Pocky Rocky 2. You're not going to save any money by importing it. Lost Vikings 2 didn't come out in Japan. Final Fight 3, or if you want to import it, Final Fight Tough, Tough. For some reason that's in English in Japan. The Japanese version is more expensive. R-Type 3 consistently goes for similar money in Japan as it does here, so you're not going to save any money. Battletoads and Double Dragon didn't come out in Japan. No, again, that was another one that was news to me because I assumed it would, but it didn't. Castlevania Vampire's Kiss. Now, I have never seen a real cartridge of this. I've seen repro cartridges of this. I've never seen a real one. I have never actually clapped eyes on the genuine European version of this, even cartridge only. So that leads me to think it's a very rare game, and it also turns out to be a very rare game in Japan as well, because I found 2 of them for sale, and they were an awful lot of money as well. You wouldn't save any money by importing it. And by the way, if you did want to import it, it's Akumajo Dracula XX is what the Famicom version is called. And finally, Super Turrican. The Japanese version is more expensive than the European one. Probably because they didn't get the sequel. They've only got one game that they all have to buy. So now I'm going to move on to the list, and after whittling it down, I have come up with, I'm going to argue 20, but in reality it might be 19 games that you can actually buy from Japan, play on a PAL console, and they're going to be cheaper than buying the cartridge version of the European game. And the reason why, okay, we'll say for argument's sake it's 19 and a half, because one of them I'm not certain about, and I've left that till the last anyway, so I can explain that when I get to it. So, Bomberman 3. Import that from Japan and save yourself a bloody fortune, honestly. Super Double Dragon, or as it's called in the Super Famicom, Return of Double Dragon. Again, you can import that, no problem. Save yourself a fortune. Kirby's Fun Pack, or Hoshi no Kirby Super Deluxe. Import it. Brawl Brothers, or as it's called in the Super Famicom, Rushing Beat Run. You can definitely import that. Operation Logic Bomb, or Ikari no Yosai. Yep, you can go and import that. Mega Man X, or as it's called in Japan, Rockman X. Definitely import that, because you will save yourself about £100, maybe more. Harvest Moon, or Bokujoyu Monogatari. Yep, import that. Space Invaders, or as it's called in Japanese, Space Invaders. Yep, import that. Soul Blazer, which is a fantastic game from Enix before they became Square Enix, or part of Square, which is called Soul Blader in Japan. Well worth importing that one. You will save yourself a bit. Mega Man 7, which is called Rockman 7. Definitely import that. Mega Man X2, which is called Rockman X2. Definitely import that. Mega Man X3, which is called, can you guess? Rockman X3. You can definitely import that. Fireman, which is one that has become more expensive in Europe purely because lots of Americans are buying it. Just so you know, Americans, you can get the Famicom version of Fireman, which is called Fireman, and it's the same game, only with some Japanese text in it, which you don't need to play the game. So leave us Europeans with the European copies that we want to buy, and stop inflating our prices by importing them to America. Buy the Japanese one, inflate their prices for a change. Sailor Moon. This is a very rare game. Well, not very rare. I have seen it. But there was only one of them released in Europe. No, there was about 80 of these released for the Super Famicom Sailor Moon games, and I don't know which one is which, but they all consistently go for about a £5. So I guarantee you that is one you could import if you can figure out which one it is that you're actually importing. So there you go. Joe and Mac 3. Again, this is a reasonable rarity in Europe because nobody bought it basically at the time, which is called Tatake Genshijin 3, and you can import that from Japan. Whirlo, or Zandra no Daibuken, which is Japanese for Whirlo. You can go and buy that. Cyvalian, import that. That's called Cyvalian in Japanese as well. Sonic Glassman, you can import that. Final Fight, you can obviously import that. There's the only text in that is when Mike Hagger gets the telly screen of his kidnapped daughter there. And the last one here on the list is going to be game 20, or 19 and a half if you like, and that is Terranigma, which is called Tenshi Sozu. in Japan. No. The reason why that is 19.5 and not 20 is because I am pretty sure that if I played the Super Famicom version of Terranigma, I would be able to finish the game because I know what to do. But if you had never played Terranigma before, there is some text-based stuff in it, and you wouldn't necessarily know what to do. Some of the text has clues on what you're supposed to do next. Now, I know what to do, so I would be able to get through that quite easily. But if you don't read Japanese, you might struggle with Terranigma. That's the only proviso I would put on that particular one, is because if you haven't played it before, you might get stuck. But if you're a bit savvy, you might be able to get away with it. Or if you've played it before, you'll probably be able to get away with it. So that's it. That is literally the only 20 games I could find that are worth importing from Japan to play on a PAL Super Nintendo. Which is surprising. Now, this may be a recent thing, that Japanese games have got very expensive, but judging by some of them that I had to cross off the list, because they're so vastly more expensive in Japan than they are in Europe, that may not be... It may be just that the conventional wisdom on this has been wrong all along. So, when you go back and you see my video where I say... it was one of the collecting videos I did, Tips and Tricks for Collectors, part 18 or whatever it was, I don't know. But I said, if you can, then import Super Famicom games. Now, for the vast majority of games, that seems that that's not the case. You're not actually going to save that much money on most of them, and in fact, I struggled to get 20 that you would actually save money on, and even then, that may turn out to be 19. 19 games out of the 760 something that make up the full PAL collection of official releases. That's not very many. So all I would suggest is maybe if you did want to collect Super Nintendo games cartridge only, get them 19 or 20 off the bat before they go up in price, and then decide whether you want to spend the extra money. Now, it depends on what you're into. Obviously, Harvest Moon is going to be more difficult to play because of the text, but you don't need most of the text to know what to do. At the beginning of the game you might, but as you play the game it sort of becomes obvious. Terranigma again is a funny one. That could go either way, but if you're a Mega Man fan and you want to buy Mega Man X, X2, X3 and Mega Man 7, just import them. Don't even go near paying the price that people want from, even a Mega Man X2 or X3 cartridge is going to set you back probably at this point a couple of £100. Some of the prices now, some of them I saw for a bit cheaper than that, but some of them were just, especially the stuff that was on eBay, was just silly money. Whereas the Japanese version of the game is going for 10, 20 quid sometimes. You have to catch it on the right day. But yeah, I mean, you really don't have to spend the earth on some of these games. And if you buy a Japanese version of Mega Man, what have you really lost out on? Nobody's playing Mega Man for its absorbing storyline. That's... Who cares? Soul Blazer is another one. Now, I know conventional wisdom also says that RPGs, you shouldn't buy the Japanese version because you won't know what's going on. Right, well, Soul Blazer is not text heavy in the slightest. The only stuff that comes up as text is what to do at the beginning of the game, and most of that is obvious. And for those of you thinking of buying it now, I'll basically tell you the stuff you collect basically fills up your magic meter, and you have to select what magic you want to use as the little ball follows you around. I mean, that's the only bit that's really explained by text, and I've just told you here. So go and buy Soul Blazer, or Soul Blazer, or Soul Blader, depending on which one you want to play. Go and do that. Otherwise, you're missing out. And yeah, Bomberman 3. How are you going to lose out by buying that from Japan? everyone knows how to play Bomberman. So yeah, but basically a lot of this comes as a surprise. And some of the stuff, I couldn't believe how expensive the Japanese versions of some things were. I mean, Captain Commando. I mean, you know, that was silly. I think that was going for like 600 quid. One of them that I saw. I mean, that was complete in box, to be fair, but 600 quid for Captain Commando. Captain fucking Commando. Are you serious? Who is paying that? Oh, have you played that game? Seriously? Would you pay 600 quid for Captain Commando? But yeah, no, that is true. That is a rarity in Japan, apparently. And the what was the other one? The Marvel one, War of the Gems. I mean, that's just silly money as well. Yeah. And I could not believe that Final Fight 3 was more expensive, but I got an average price. I can't remember what it was because all my notes, I've typed this up. All my notes are upstairs, handwritten. The average price that I could find on a PAL version of Final Fight 3 was far less than even the lowest price that I could find for a Japanese version of Final Fight Tough, which is the Super Famicom version. For some reason, the Japanese version of Final Fight 3 is so much more expensive. It's madness. Maybe they're having their own Super Nintendo revival over there. I don't know. I know Super Nintendo games have got more expensive here since more people have got into collecting them. Maybe the same thing's happening in Japan. I haven't got a clue. But yeah. Now, maybe if you actually go to Japan, that might be a different story. Because obviously I can only really search the stuff that's available to buy here from Japan. So that might be a completely different story if you were to actually go there. I don't know. Is it worth the airplane tickets? Maybe if you were going to go over there and buy 100 games. But other than that, I don't know. So there you are. And like I say, that's quite a few days of research gone into that. And I've done that so you don't have to, basically. Now, if anyone's got any comments or questions or thumbs up or anything like that, feel free. That's why these things are getting done. And if you have any, if you don't want to put them on YouTube or whatever, you can always twat me on the Twattosphere. And yeah, so now there's going to be a little end card, and it's going to have some videos around here, and there'll be a subscribe button here. And yeah, hopefully you've learned something from that, and I definitely have, and I'll see you in another video.